Hello, I have just read Chapter 7 of The Last of the Jedi Dark Warning. So we pick up where we left off. They're in space being attacked by the Empire's starfighters, which again I assume are the TIE fighters. And they're struggling to shake them. Obi-Wan, Toma sends Obi-Wan, and Toma opens up some cannons for Obi-Wan and Ferris to go and start manning. Trevor looks at Obi-Wan, gets an idea. He comes back up, tells Toma to because there's no neighbouring system, and he tells Toma to go into the star tunnel that they had come through, that Obi-Wan, Ferris and Trevor had come through. And they start making their way over there. Because there's a storm, there's a shear storm, a space shear going on there. So Obi-Wan directs Toma and Reyna to go there, and Toma's a bit cautious. He says they can go around it. Reyna says that no, Obi-Wan's right, we can lose them in the storm. And Obi-Wan asks, how much faith do you trust in your ship? Toma says yes, he trusts in it, and he trusts his pilot Reyna more. So they start, and so Obi-Wan goes back to manning his laser cannon while they start making their way through the storm. And Reyna says that the trick is to try to not resist the storm. And which one of them was impressed? Hold on. And as they start to enter it, that's when Toma says they can still go around. Where is that line that Reyna says? Hold on. Can't find the line. Yeah, we learn that the storm's quite a bad storm. I can't find the line for some reason. I am looking in the chapter. Ferris admires her when she said the trick is to not resist the storm. There we go, I found the line. And Ferris admires her nerve, because not a lot of pilots are willing to let their ship take over. A little bit before that, Trevor is a bit nervous because of how that storm is not like any ordinary storm. It is quite a dangerous storm, and Toma reassures him, saying that it's double bolted, triple hulled. He built it himself during the Clone Wars, and Trevor says yes, but that's not any ordinary storm. And he winds up skidding across and as he says that just as they just as the space gear hits the ship, and they start, and he skids across the floor and winds up slamming into the console. Eventually, Ferris notices that the Imperial starfighters are going, and he says, "The starships are retreating," Ferris called. "They are more afraid of the storm than they are of their admiral. Or else," he thought privately, "they figure that we're doomed." Eventually, they presume that they make it out of the storm, but they're in a kind of grey haze. They can't quite really see where they are. And that's when Ferris and Obi-Wan get a warning from the Force, and that's when they see an asteroid, and I assume the grey haze was the asteroid. That's when Reyna cuts back all speed just before they crash into it. And Toma's a bit cute, and as they do land, Obi-Wan points to a little area for Reyna to land in, and Toma scans, and he's a bit curious because they think they're out of the storm, and he's thinking, what, this asteroid hasn't been mapped. It's large enough to have been mapped. It has an atmosphere, but there's no record of it. And as Obi-Wan opens up the cockpit canopy and comes out, he notes that he thinks it's still in the storm, and it just hasn't been able to get out, and so it's been travelling with the storm. And Ferris says, well, that would explain why it hasn't been mapped. And I'm just going to read out this little interaction because, again, it's with Trevor. It's quite funny. "At least we're safe," Reyna said. She stretched. "And I could use a rest." "Yeah, getting pounded by the Empire's starfighters and then pulverised by a galactic storm will do that to you," Trevor said. "Not to mention me missed lunch." Reyna laughed and slung an arm around Trevor. "You're starting to grow on me, kid." "Yeah, just like goblin moss," Trevor said. And that's when Obi-Wan asks Toma, Trevor and Reyna start to go off, so it's just them five. But Trevor and Reyna start to go off, and Bill gets to find and make shelter. While Toma asks, "You've been waiting to ask me something?" to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan says yes. Asks Toma if he could tell him about the death of Gavin Mullen. Again, how are you meant to pronounce that? Mullen. M-U-L-N. It doesn't go right. Mullen. I'm just going to call him Gavin for now, but because that is his first name. And he asks about the death of Gavin, and Toma's a bit confused, and he goes, "Death? Gavin's not dead. He's alive." He goes, "But Gavin isn't dead. He's alive." And I predicted it as soon as it mentioned he was presumed dead by Obi-Wan, which was literally the first time he was mentioned in the book, so I called it. Again, action. We're moving into chapter 8 now. We're almost halfway through the book, and we haven't really had a chance to just stop and slow down since the start of it, because it's just been each chapter has had at least some sort of action scene. So and keep in mind, some of these chapters don't even break 5 pages. So I do hope we get a little bit of a break now. It definitely seems like we may be getting that. I think but it would not surprise me if next chapter we get more action somehow. I don't know how. It would probably be trying to escape the storm, but yeah. I enjoy the chapter. I'm looking forward to the next one, and yeah. Again, not a whole lot to talk about aside from Trevor got some good quips. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello, I have just read chapter 8 of The Last of the Jedi Dark Warning. Again, this is one of the chapters, this is the chapter I was asking for, a chapter with no action and just talking. It's right in the halfway point of the chapters, but hey. So we open up with Toma explaining what had happened to Garen to Obi-Wan. We learn that Garen and Toma had quite a bit in common, and it didn't take them long to negotiate the terms of the truce, and that was when, and eventually that's when Order 66 was, of course, issued, and he hid him away from the clone troopers, hid him in some volcanic caves. Inquisitors questioned him later on. Obi-Wan and Ferris ask Obi-Wan, I think, asks if one of the Inquisitors was called Malorum. Thomas says no, and Obi-Wan thinks, oh well, not everything leads back to Malorum. But he then Toma goes on to explain that eventually, once the Empire left, thinking that Garen may have left the planet, that's when everything quieted down. That's when Garen told him that he had to leave, so Toma gave him a ship, and he told him to only tell where, and Garen told Toma to only tell where he was going to another Jedi, and he tells Obi-Wan that Obi-Wan Ferris, that he had gone off to Ilum, which, if you don't know, that's the place most Jedi go in their... Sorry. I just finished reading the chapter, and for some reason I get very burpy at the moment while reading The Last of the Jedi. But he then explains that if you don't know, Ilum is the place where Jedi go during their Jedi trials to build their lightsabers, and there's usually a series of tests that you have to go through, and at the end they of course get the Kyber crystal to make their lightsaber, and Ferris is overjoyed at this. He's excited. He goes, oh, of course, why didn't I think of it before? And thinks, and maybe other Jedi have gone there. And Obi-Wan is a bit... And Toma then goes off to help Reyna and Trevor create a shelter, but Obi-Wan's a bit more cautious, and, well, Ferris is thinking, oh, I can make a lightsaber. Thinking, oh, that would be really helpful. And Obi-Wan is a bit cautious because, of course, Ferris, he's gone through the trials before, and he's made a lightsaber before, but of course it's been years since he did that, and it did feel like he had his lightsaber only for a brief amount of time before he ended it in. But Obi-Wan's a bit cautious, and because of course Ferris has lost his connection to the Force, he's been slowly regaining it, and Obi-Wan is a bit cautious because usually it's even difficult for the most prepared from the Padawan that is extremely prepared, for the most prepared of Padawans. And Ferris says, I know, but I've been through them before. Sure, there are some things I've forgotten, but we can't keep waiting. And because again, they just can't keep waiting and putting things off against them trying to fight the Empire. And that maybe caution is what led to the Jedi's defeat. And as much as it hurts Obi-Wan to hear that accusation, it even says, in the book it does say, the accusation stung, but Obi-Wan had thought it too. And because he had so much caution about Anakin, yet he could not predict just how corrupt he would have ended up becoming when he became Darth Vader. And how Ferris had known there was something going on with Anakin, but and Obi-Wan just didn't do anything about it. And Obi-Wan starts thinking, because yes, he could go over to Ilum and find his friend Garen. Find his friend Garen Mullen, which I'm again just going to call Garen. He could go over there, find Garen, which again hit to him. That seemed quite typical of Garen to just go to a place where Jedi would go. He could go there and find Garen, but he also needs to be able to protect Luke and Leia, and their existence is under threat with Malorum having sent Boba Fett to Polis Master to investigate. And so Obi-Wan has to make a decision, and he winds up hearing Qui-Gon's voice, because his heart is calling to go over to Garen, but he needs to protect Luke and Leia, and Qui-Gon tells him that if Luke is to rise, he needs something to join. Obi-Wan says, "You already told me that. That's why I went and found Ferrus." And I'm just going to read out the interaction. "If Luke is to rise, he must have something to join," Qui-Gon's voice said in his mind. Obi-Wan turned to look in the distance so Ferrus wouldn't see his distraction. "Yes," he answered. "You've told me that already. It is why I left to help Ferrus. If Luke is to rise, he must be protected from those who seek to do harm. That's from those who seek to do him harm. So should I go to Polis Master? You should follow your feelings." Obi-Wan knew what that meant. "They led me there," he told his master. "So go." And that's when Qui-Gon goes. And Obi-Wan has made his decision. That Ferrus will go and find Garen, and he will go over to Polis Master to ensure Luke's and Leia's existence are safe, because even though he had gone to extents to make sure they were safe, he couldn't be sure. And Ferrus is a bit, you don't agree with me, and Obi-Wan is, "Yes, I do agree with you, you should go to Ilum, but I can't." And Ferrus is, "Right," and it's not as if, and even in the caves, I'm just going to read out the interaction. Ferrus has stopped pacing and was watching him. "You don't agree with me." "I do agree," Obi-Wan said. "You're right, this is your time to be bold, to take the biggest chances." Ferrus looked relieved. "Besides, you'll be with me in the caves." Obi-Wan spoke slowly, knowing what he was about to say would be a surprise to Ferrus. "No, I won't be. I'm not going with you. There's something else I have to do." "What could be more important than your friends?" Ferrus asked incredulously. And that's when Obi-Wan looks at Ferrus, not being really able to give an answer, because even though he trusts... Sorry, I'm going burpy. For some reason we're reading the book. Because even though he trusts Ferrus, he can't risk telling him. He knows that there is a risk that Ferrus may share the secret of Luke and Leia, and Ferrus doesn't even know that Vader is Anakin. And that's when Obi-Wan tells him that it's all their fates, and how that is more important, and Ferrus is a bit angry at that. And Ferrus is described as being stiffly, and he says, but he can do the trials alone. And Obi-Wan says he can take him over to Ilum, he can drop him off there, go off to what he needs to, because apparently Polis Master isn't that far from Ilum. And Trevor can keep watch and alert him if anything goes wrong. And Ferris gives a short, angry nod, and he didn't question Obi-Wan further. And everyone says he can still help him. He knows the entrance behind. He knows another entrance behind the cave, because if to them it is logical for Jedi to go to Ilum, it's logical the Empire might be there. I think having the same thought process, and so he knows a secret entrance to the Crystal Cave. And Ferris thinks, good. Having now let go of the anger and accepting it and moving on, and everyone just says, I'll just read it out. The anger left Ferris's face. He had accepted it and let it go, just as a Jedi should. Suddenly he was all business, focused on the next stage of the mission. Good. Not so good, Obi-Wan said. The secret way leads straight... Actually, no, I'll go back up a little bit. I can still help you, Obi-Wan said. You must be careful. If it seems logical to us that Jedi will go to Ilum, then it is logical to the Empire as well. They will have some kind of presence there, but I know another way to the caves, a secret way. The anger left Ferris's face. He had accepted it and let it go, just as a Jedi should. Suddenly, he was all business, focused on the next stage of the mission. Good. Not so good, Obi-Wan said. The secret way leads straight through a Gorgodan nest. So, and I searched for Gorgodan, they don't particularly look nice. And that's where we leave off the chapter. I enjoy the chapter. This is the chapter I was waiting for, because for the past 7 chapters it has just been action, 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 action with no break. We've had a few moments of just talking, but nothing really that lasts too long. We've finally just had a chapter that is just talking, and I think this is what was needed, and it isn't trying to follow an action scene from the previous chapter, and I think that makes it a bit more easier to keep in mind, I think. We get to kind of see about how Ferris is. We get a bit more about how Ferris acts. We see a bit more of how Obi-Wan feels, and I think it was a good chapter overall. So, yeah. And we see that Ferris, even after Obi-Wan told him at the end of the last book that he has to wait, and that's what he believes will save the Jedi, that he is still a bit frustrated, and of course he doesn't know that this connects back to that, but yeah, okay, maybe where I was going doesn't really make sense now that I think about it. But you do get to see how Ferris feels about the whole situation, and how to him this is opening up the opportunity to gather the surviving Jedi to fight against the Empire like he was wanting to do. And Obi-Wan's not there when he was expecting him to be, and he's a bit confused as to why. Again, I think this is a bit of a recession maybe in the character, because again of what was explained at the end of the last chapter. But as someone who does writing myself, you can sometimes forget scenes. I mean, I've been writing a book since October 5th of 2023. I have forgotten quite a few scenes in that book that I've written, so when I do go back to read it, when I finish it, that's when, which is what my intention is. That's when I can kind of solve all the problems and stuff, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's something that Julie Watson just forgot about, or again, probably more logical, it's just Ferris isn't clicking that that's the same as this. And even then, Ferrus is quick to just let it go. If Obi-Wan needs to do something else, then that's important, that he believes may be relevant to their fates, and so be it. I guess that's how Ferrus sees it. You can be frustrated about it, but if Obi-Wan believes it may lead to their protection, then maybe he has faith in that. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all for watching this, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. Hello everyone. I have just read chapter 9 of The Last of the Jedi Dark Warning. So when we open up on the asteroids, we don't really spend much time on there. Reyna and Toma wish to stay behind because they're going to be wanted by the Empire. They're going to be, and they think they're going to be safe there for a little while. They also stocked up on food and other supplies in case they had to make a quick escape. Ferrus promises that he'll find them and he'll come back for them, and that he'll come back with supplies if they need to stay for a little bit longer than expected. And they have a homing beacon there that they hope is going to be traceable once outside of the storm. And so Trevor is asked by, I think, Reyna if he's sure he wants to go, and he hold on, trying to find what it says. She asks if he wants to go, and he says, "It's hard to leave all this," Trevor said, waving a careless hand. But yeah, I shouldn't have, because Trevor's simple, but you can pack a lot into a few simple words. And so Trevor, Obi-Wan and Ferrus get in the ship. They start to fly off. Trevor's flying the ship. Not Trevor. Ferrus is flying the ship. He starts flying with some tips that Reyna gave. They figure the homing beacon, they are able to trace through the storm, which is good because they weren't sure if they could. And Obi-Wan and Trevor don't really talk for the journey to Willem. And it takes less than a day to get there, but they don't really talk throughout the journey because Ferrus is still a bit disapproving. That's what they said, wasn't it? Ferrus's disapproval of Obi-Wan's decision hung between them, and they passed most of the journey in silence. Why was it, Obi-Wan thought, that he could be sure of a decision, yet be torn by its effects? And we get to see that and we get to see from everyone's perspective if Ferrus is able to pass the trials inside of the cave on Ilum. That will be the sign that he can be a Jedi again. If he's able to pass those trials, if he doesn't pass those trials, then he won't be able to become a Jedi again in everyone's eyes, and if he can, then he can. That's the sign that he can become a Jedi again. Eventually he thinks about how gifted Ferrus was, but mentally thinks back to the conversation he had with Qui-Gon in the beginning of the first book. And he thinks about how much stronger he could become with a lightsaber, and with a new hold, with his hold on the Force constantly renewing and strengthening, and just how he would be even stronger than he was as a Padawan in the temple. And to get through the caves to find Garen, it could either break him or make him. and we learn that Obi-Wan does have trust in Ferris. And that was the lesson that Anakin never learned. Anakin believed that he was the only one that could accomplish the hard things. But Obi-Wan knows that even if he was able to stay, Ferris going into the caves on Ilum, that would be something he'd have to do on his own. It even says this was one of those times. Even if Ferris never understood, never accepted him, even if Ferris failed. Hang on, I need to go back a little bit because I just lost the context for that, didn't I? For you all. But Obi-Wan knew there were times he had to step back and let another go forward. This was one of those times. Even if Ferris never understood, never accepted him, even if Ferris fails. Eventually they land at Ilum, and they start to go around the back of the planet in case there's any orbiting surveillance. Obi-Wan says there is none, but I assume, because it does say it's good, there's no orbiting surveillance, but I assume in case. And Ferris says that there doesn't have to be, and it's obvious that they don't consider the Jedi a threat anymore. And they try to get, and everyone gets close enough to get a sensor reading, and then he goes closer to the planet, and both Ferris and Obi-Wan really do like Toma's ship. Ferris considers it the best ship he's ever flown, I think, and Obi-Wan really likes the feel of it. Anyway, Obi-Wan flies down to a glacial lake and flies down to the edge. He tells Ferris that he'll have to climb up, and pardon me. And that's when he when he starts to make his way through the cave. He can't give in to the visions. And not to let them stop him, and says that the crystals lie in the middle of the cave. If Garen is there, that's where he'll be. And I did laugh at that line because if he's there, of course he's going to be. Of course that's where he's going to be. But then I read it again, and the context realigns itself. But it's just in the alternate context, it can be a bit. Well, if he's there, that he's if he's there, then that is where he is. But that wasn't the context it was in. It was meant to be if Garen is there, if Garen's going to be anywhere, that's where he'll be. That's what the context was, but it's just the way it was worded. It kind of made me laugh. And Trevor as they land, going back a little bit, Trevor has a sarcastic remark saying, "Wow, you picked the best spots, Obi-Wan. I can tell this will be fun. It'll be better than a nest of Gorgodans," Ferris said. "Is that my only choice?" "You can always come with me, Trevor," Obi-Wan said. "I can leave you someplace safe and come back for you." He shook his head as Obi-Wan knew he would. "No thanks," he said carelessly. "I'm getting used to waiting for Ferris." So, yeah, I don't know what it is about Trevor. He has some great remarks. I think I prefer Ferris's humour, but Trevor's great for is great for the very quick, on-the-spot humour, whereas Ferris is very more situational. But anyway, as Obi-Wan does leave Trevor and Ferris on Ilum, he feels a bit of a pain, and it hurts him, and he can't even look back because he knows it's going to be too painful, and he gets the feeling that if he doesn't come back soon, something bad might happen to them. So he very quickly makes his way over to Polis Master, and he starts remembering about Padme, how he and Yoda brought her to Polis Master. as it was a sanctuary for her. It was the safest place they could take her. And how, what was it, Munili, what was it, Munili Chun, was it? I know the last name is Chun, can't remember the first name, that's the problem. Manili Chun, that's what it was, not Munili, Manili. It's Manili, not Munili. But anyway, Obi-Wan, he comes into the reception area, still thinking about Padme, and we even get to get a little bit of a line that was presumably from Padme, where when the droid asks, "What is the nature of your condition?" we have a flashback line. It says, "My condition is heartbreak," from Padme. And Obi-Wan keeps thinking about how he carried her through. And as Obi-Wan explains, he wants to speak to Manili-chun. The droid says, "Please wait." The vid screen blinks out, and Obi-Wan is left to think about Padme for a while. How they brought her to Police Master because it was a sanctuary, and how that was the one place they could trust to go because Manili-chun had been a very advocate supporter, very loyal supporter of the Republic's cause, and was completely trustworthy and had assisted Yoda many times in the past. And it was the one place they trusted to bring Padme to. The med droids couldn't figure out why they couldn't save Padme, but Obi-Wan knew her strength was only fine, but he believed he knew. He thought that her strength was only finite, and that the only strength that she had left was that she was to just give birth to her kids, make sure they were healthy, and then she'd succumb. And everyone would dedicate, and it was only, and they had Obi-Wan and Yoda barely absorbed the shock when they realised they would need to delete all the records and files to protect them, surrounding to protect Luke and Leia, surrounding their birth. And now Obi-Wan had pretty much would fight to his last breath to protect them. And because of the amount of favours Manili-chun had done for Yoda in the past, surely he would help now. And Manili-chun eventually walks in, he sees Obi-Wan, and is a bit pleased to see him, and then goes worried, and he starts and he brings Obi-Wan over to his office, and he says, I think I know why you're here. And it's because of Sancor, which I've mentioned a few times in these reviews if you've been keeping up with them. And Obi-Wan goes, "Who's Sancor?" And Manili-chun explains that he's an Inquisitor, and he's and Obi-Wan says he was afraid of that, and he didn't realise an Inquisitor was there. And I'll just read off what Chun says. Chun led him into his small office. First, an investigator came. He never gave his name, but he copied all our records and took them back to Malorum. That was about a month ago. Now this one arrived. He's an expert on record security. He's already done an exhaustive search on the memory banks of the Medroids, even the ones who weren't here during that time. Obi-Wan asks if Malorum knows something, and if to Chun it seems like he may know the truth, and Chun doesn't think so, but he thinks that they may suspect. Chun doesn't think they know anything, but he thinks they suspect something, because again, Malorum is presumably was guessed by, I think, Ferris or Obi-Wan to be interested in Padme's death when Ferris was looking through the investigation files in the last book. Pardon me, sorry. And Sun knows that they're determined because Sankor asked for the supply records, and everyone asks why he would want those. And Sun explains that because through the supply records they would pretty much be able to see which supplies were used during the time Padme was there, and they'd pretty much be able to gather if Padme had given birth or not. And everyone asks and they do certain tests, etc. And we learn that Sankor was getting ready. We learn that Sun was on his way to summon Osh Scout, the police master and supply officer. And Sankor wants to question him, given he's one of the few police masters that's able to speak, apparently. And Sun explains that he has no choice and he can only hope, and that they can't trace anything. And Obi-Wan thinks quickly, and he asks if he's seen Osh Scout yet, and Sun says that no, he's just been in the records office. Obi-Wan asks if he can access the supply records, and Sun says yes, he can access them. He can access all records. And then Obi-Wan says that there were recalls that there was another person who was wounded in a battle alongside Padme in the med center when Padme was giving birth, and if he could make that person seem more of a target, look like the bigger fish to find by altering the supplies by altering the supplies and tests that were done on them and given to them, to make them look like a bigger fish to get. And everyone's Tons realises it, and he asks who, and Obi-Wan says it doesn't matter, we don't need a name, we just need a profile. There are plenty of enemies of the Empire who have gone underground. Since the end of the Clone Wars, and one of them could have easily fled here. Maloran will try to figure out who it is. The trail will lead nowhere, we just have to plant the seed. And Tion does of course adds in all the new supply information. He asks if they should let Osh Scout, the of course police master and supply officer, in on it. Obi-Wan says that no, because Sankor hasn't seen him yet. If he knows about it before he's seen him, Sankor may be able to draw the information out. So obviously, that's not mentioned in the book yet, but you know, that's why. So Tun is a bit sceptical because Osh Scout is very thorough and meticulous. So they're going to let him know after his interview with Sankor. And Tun gets out the disc with the new files, and he warns Obi-Wan to be careful, because again, they would be able to trace... Sankor would be able to trace the files back to Tun if they were deleted. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. Sankor would be able to trace the files back to Tun if Tun deleted the files surrounding the birth. But he wouldn't be able to trace them if he was adding stuff onto the files back to Tun. And Tion is a bit And John says, Obi-Wan, my friend, you must be careful. The Inquisitor is clever. John ran his hands along his cheeks and blew out a dire breath. I thought we had thought of everything. I checked and triple-checked the memory. I thought we had thought of everything. I checked and triple-checked. The memory wipes are solid. There is no record of the births. There's no record of yourself or Yoda being here. I didn't imagine they would come digging like this. And everyone says they're not doing this because they don't. They're doing this because they. They're doing this because they have. They're doing this because they don't have information, not because they do. And Obi-Wan. Sorry, almost lost my bookmark then. And Obi-Wan says that they should go because they can do something. And John says, if you can send him back where he came from, that would be great. But if he finds out we altered these files, we could both end up executed. And that's where we end off the chapter. Again, more talking chapters. This is something that Dark Warning has really lacked, because it really has struggled with talking chapters. It's just for about the first, the first 8 chapters, was it? No, the first 7. It pretty much just, every chapter has an action scene, in some capacity. Some chapters didn't to the same extent as others, but every chapter had an action scene up until chapter 8. Chapter 8 was what broke it. And chapter 8 is, of course, is the halfway point in the chapters for the book. I'm over halfway through the book now, through the pages. But I am glad we're getting more just talking chapters and figuring stuff out, because it really did feel like with Dark Warning it was just battle sequence after battle sequence after battle sequence after battle sequence, and each chapter went straight into each other, and it just did feel a bit... It was good for the cliffhangers, but you were just waiting for it to just slow down for a bit. And I'm glad that we've had at least 2 chapters where it has slowed down. I know we're going to get more action soon, because I know how Sankor dies. But I am glad we've had a few more talking chapters. I think with this chapter in specific, I am liking just how much we're getting to see Obi-Wan, just how broken he is, and how worried he is. You know, he has a bad feeling and worries about Ferris and Trevor, and that he may have to come back because he has a bad feeling something bad will happen and they may be in danger. You get to see just how painful it is for him to look back because of that feeling, knowing that he may never see them again. You get to see just how painful the memory of Padme in Police Master was, and there is a whole lot to it, to Obi-Wan's character in this chapter, and you really just get to see that he's going through it, yet he's keeping his composure, because there is no moment where it's described as him breaking down or anything, but he's keeping his composure and he's really going through it. And I think that is one thing this series so far, although I'm fairly sure Obi-Wan doesn't appear in the later books, maybe in one, because I know it's on the cover of one of the later ones. I'm fairly sure it's on the cover that's used as the main image for Ferris Olin on Wikipedia, but I know he probably has at least a small appearance in some capacity in one of the later books, but I'm fairly sure after Dark Warning or Underworld he doesn't appear again. But one thing the Last of the Jedi series has done very well so far is just showing how Obi-Wan's going through it, and this chapter continued that. you really just get to see the pain and desperation he's going through, but you also get to see that loyalty and I guess almost love, fatherly love for Luke and Leia, and how he would do literally anything to protect them. And it's beautifully sad and wonderful at the same time. And I think that is something that the books of these two books, Desperate Mission, Dark Warning, are doing very well. I know I've made it clear in, I think, earlier reviews of Dark Warning or the later reviews of Desperate Mission that I've not read the Jedi Quest books. And I know this is sort of like I'm fairly sure this is a spiritual successor to those, because there are quite a few things from those books that are mentioned. But I think maybe some of the things from those books will probably hit a lot more for me if I did read them before going into Last of the Jedi. But I haven't, because I didn't even know they existed before I read before it began Last of the Jedi. But they do still hit. It gives you enough context for it to have an impact. And yeah, there's not really a whole lot else I want to say. I'm going to be interested to see if Sankor and Obi-Wan actually come face to face and actually meet. Because I know they do fight. I know at least Obi-Wan's chased by Sankor, but I am going to be interested to see if they have an interaction. Because, again, I mentioned in the Desperate Mission, I was not expecting Melora and Obi-Wan to get in the same room. They didn't interact or anything, but I didn't even expect them to get I did not expect them to get as close as they did to each other twice. So I'm going to be interested to see if Obi-Wan does get an interaction with Sankor. So yeah, I guess that kind of ends this review off. I'm probably merging this with my review of Chapter 8, maybe Chapter 7 if I didn't post that, I think. Have I posted my review of Chapter 7? I don't think so. No, I haven't. Okay. Just checking. So, yeah. I'm looking forward to the next chapter. I'm glad we've gone back to some more of the talking chapters because, look, as much as we all enjoy a good bit of action, I think in story-wise, it really just did seem like we were going from place to place with having action. And we could have cut out a couple of chapters if we just didn't have Boba Fett somehow find them. And I think maybe it wasn't that necessary to have Boba Fett there chasing them. But I am also somewhat glad because we have had a bit more time with Ferris and Trevor, and we especially with Trevor. Ferris, I think, was a bit more well established in the previous book. But this book is really where Trevor comes in and shines. He has a lot of great lines so far. I know I'm talking about this as if I've finished the book. I haven't, but Trevor has a lot of good lines in the book so far. And yeah, I am glad. I'm glad we've gone back to some of the talking chapters. And I'm looking forward to continuing the book. So yeah, I'll leave the review here. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.